This class we are going to discuss about library management in disruptive times under paper 4, management of library and information centers for masters of library and information science under module 2 MIS, that is system analysis and control. See, this library management in disruptive times basically related to change management, awkward management, newer situation when we are going to showcase our library in the unknown environment. And under this module, we are going to discuss things like introduction, disruption and disaster, disaster global perspectives, disasters Indian perspective, causes of disruption or disaster, library and disaster, disaster planning, disaster preparedness, disaster response, prevention, recovery, conclusion, and as usual exercise and MCQ questions, right? So, students will see, after going through this, one would like to identify causes of disaster in libraries, the need for disaster management in libraries, disaster planning in libraries and other information centers, preparing guideline for the disaster planning process and devise ways to prepare library for avoiding, tackling and managing disaster. Now, before to take inside of the disruption library services in disruption times or disasters times, we have to have very clear conception about the disruption and disaster. In a nutshell, disaster is the cause, disruption is the result. There are several reasons why we may face disasters, and due to the disasters level, we have to face disruption, discontinuation, delink from our continuous or routine work of anything, be it bank, be it market, be it transportation, be it library, be it educational institution, whatever it is, this disruption will become. So, disruption, I must say, is the effect of disaster as a cause, and disasters has had its big area of discussion in the current society, and considering our current technological atmosphere in the educational industry, latest guest is AI, artificial intelligence, machine language, robotic science. So we have to have face D disaster or E disaster in addition to our known natural disasters. And as a matter of fact, High Power Committee was constituted in August 1999 under the chairmanship of J.C. Pant. The mandate of HPC to prepare comprehensive model plans to disaster management at the national, state and district level. This was the first attempt in India towards a systematic, comprehensive and holistic look at all disasters. 30 old disasters have been identified by the HPC, that High Power Committee, which were grouped into the following 5 categories. Now, the major category is water and climate. Under the water and climate, there are many things, right from floods, cyclones, tornadoes, hailstorms, cloudburst, heat wave and cold wave, snow, avalanches, droughts, sea erosion, thunder, lightning. Simultaneously, geological disaster, landslide and mud flows, earthquakes, large fires, dam failures and dam bursts, mine fires, and biological epidemics, that is pest attack, cattle epidemics, food poisoning, then chemical and industrial nuclear, called chemical and industrial disaster, nuclear disaster, and finally that is fifth one is accidental, forest fire, urban fire, mine flooding, oil spill, major building collapse, serial bomb blasts, festival related disaster, electrical disaster and fires, air, road and rail accident, boat capsizing and village fire. Sometimes the village life is also disrupted, disturbed due to sudden attack of some animal who are came before the village or population lived area for their food to meet their hunger, right? So there are several types of disruption as disaster may become in the society, and we being not only a librarian but also a responsible citizen of the country need to know how to combat with the disaster to avoid the disruption, to avoid the life lost by and large. Okay, so you see, considering the nature and type of disaster or crisis, there are different ministry set up by Government of India called nodal ministry, and people, believe me, is not aware about to whom we will know for what particular occurrence as disaster. Here by this table, I want to show you that air accident we have to inform Ministry of Civil Aviation. Civil strife we have to inform Ministry of Home Affairs. Likewise, biological disaster, Ministry of Health, chemical disaster, Ministry of Environment, railway accident, Ministry of Railways, like that. Now these disasters, global perspectives, actually under this title I have two slides, that is why it is called, first one is 1 by 2, I mean first slide of second slide, right? And then second and second slide, not 1 by 2 means up like that. So these disasters losses have shown an increasing trend globally due to urbanization and increasing population. These two are the very capital problem of the current society in global level in kinds of development versus environment. You see, in the urbanization means there are different, our flat and construction, road is being made for our transport and lifelong development. As a matter of fact, nature is going to be lost, and that is why frequently nowadays we are facing earthquake, landslides, and these landslides, this kind of natural disaster do not have any boundary. That okay, we will center in India, we will center in Japan, we will center in America, not that. It is irrespective of the country and their nature. The disasters may become to anybody at any one's time at any given point of situation. And then here you see, Asia bears much of brunt. Nearly half of the meaning and classification of disasters, 23 world major natural disasters recorded over more than 3 decades occurred in the region. As a result, Asia has become the world's most disaster-prone region, involving 80% of the total affected population, 40% of the total deaths, and 46% of the total economic losses. As per the census of CRED 97 to 2001, disasters have international ramification in terms of direct and indirect impact or impacts. 11,159 casualties in rest of the world. Within Asia, 24% of the casualties occurred in India owing to its size, population and vulnerability. Now, let us introduce with the disasters causes family. I mean, who are the member of the family of disasters cause? In simple words, what are the different causes for which we have to face this kind of disasters, particularly in India? That is flood, droughts, earthquake, cyclone, landslide, and avalanches. Now, man-made disasters sometimes, due to some confrontation with the society people, we have enough experience about the news event, be it electronic and print, that library resources have been burnt, library have been burnt, library have been attacked, bomb blasting took place at the library. As a matter of fact, what happened? The valuable resources of a particular library going to be lost, which cannot be recapitulated by any paise, any rupees. So we have to be careful enough to restore, to preserve, to afford our century-old civilization history stored in a library need to be secured as much as possible. And for that, we have to have some idea, being a librarian in particular and being a citizen in general, about the disruption and disasters. And this disasters management right today is a hot cake, right? Every time government, policymaker, agencies, NGOs, corporate bodies, they are very much concerned on kind of this disasters. And due to the imbalancing of earth, we are facing nowadays the building is lost, big building lost their balance and try to be occupy the position of other building, other roads and other areas. And as considering all these things, United Nations Development Program and the International Red Cross Society, they have also been engaged to find out the ways how to mitigate or to envisage the way to mitigate the disaster, to save the society, to save the resources of any nation. Vulnerability profile of India: physical vulnerability, socioeconomic vulnerability. The physical vulnerability relates to the physical location of people, their proximity to the hazard zone, and standard for safety of maintained in counter the effects. On the other hand, socioeconomic vulnerability, the degree to which a population is affected by a calamity will not purely lie in the physical components of vulnerability, but in contextual relating to the prevailing social and economic condition and its consequential effects on human activities within a given society. Now, following steps are imperative for the vulnerability assessment and preparedness in high-risk zone, identification of various hazards-prone areas, preparation of detailed vulnerability profile, mapping food insecurity, aviation hazards, landslide hazards, etc. Vulnerability and risk assessment of building from its civil to electrical, developing disaster damage scenarios, developing technical guideline for hazard resistance construction, upgrading of hazard resistance of existing housing stock by retrofitting and crafting legal regime to be adapted for infrastructure development. Forget about all these literary things. Coming to the reality, in most of the libraries, there is no even emergency exit indicator. There are some radium sticker available in the market, and there are some pictorial or symbolic figure we can paste in the wall to come out to save the human life during any disruption or disasters. So you see, this at least we can do, that due to any occurrence, because many users, many guests came to the library and used the reading room, reference room, journal section, circulation desk, transaction history, terminal of the catalog for membership and others, and main stack, and they go away. But they don't know what are the emergency exit. If any untoward situation will come, how they will save their life. So as a primary step, at least we have to paste the emergency radium sticker inside the library building, and if possible, don't forget to paste it with braille signage so that the specially able students and users or clientele, their life is also equally valuable and their life is also to be saved. So if we paste a notice or sticker which is for the common people, what about the challenged people? And we are talking about inclusive library services. So, dear students, this is mandatory that the sticker emergency exit will be made for both general and specially abled library users, so that at least due to any fire occurrence because of ACs and fans during heavy heat weather, I mean May onwards or April onwards, I must say, that there is high chance of this kind of inside fire occurrence due to electrical circuit and short circuit and many things, voltage up down, and there is a very technicalities. There are many reasons why this can be happen. So we need to save our life that time. Then environmental concern, global warming and extreme climate, then agroforestry and urban risk. Let me just route the agroforestry. There are many subheadings under agroforestry: control of soil regression, disaster management, control of desertification, flood control, drought moderation, reduction in the pollution of groundwater resulting from high inputs of fertilizers, increasing biodiversity in the farming system and watershed scale, increasing food security and hierarchy reduces pressures on land resources, checking deforestation and its associated impact on environment, reducing pressures on forest through on-farm supply of fuel, wood, fodder and other forest products, reduction in the build-up of atmosphere carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases, disaster prevention, rehabilitation and reconstruction. Now you see, the moment we are talking about development and environment, of course, we are living in the 21st century. We are the community of 21st century. We have to be developed. At the same time, we have to be caring enough on environment. We have to be give due attention to save our environment. Otherwise, our future will be risky. So, by this table, modernist and postmodernist, how they are thinking regarding urbanization and urban design, I am just going to figure out. Now, Disaster Management Act 2005, considering the urgency and its impact, Government of India is kind enough to pass its act in the year 2005 to prevent the disaster management. The first is prevention of danger or threat of any disaster, mitigation or reduction of risk of any disaster or its severity or consequences, capacity building, preparedness to deal with any disaster, prompt response to any threatening disaster situation or disaster, assessing severity or magnitude of effects of any disaster, evacuation, rescue and relief, and rehabilitation and reconstruction. Then you see disaster libraries. Being a librarian or a library staff or a library colleague or a library professional, we have to have disaster planning, a policy document. Possible threats to libraries and the resources: fire, water, physical damage, biological agents. And our new agenda is e-disaster or e-disruption. Then importance of libraries, and before doing this, somebody may ask, why you are supposed to be much worried to protect the library resources? Why? Why we need to have a plan of library disaster management plan? Simply because enabling force for learning, library provides an environment in which creativity is fostered, centered for creation and recreation of academic activities, promotes dissemination of research, enables networking between researchers, heart of an academic institution, repository of agriculture, repository of culture and society. Now, by this one slide, I just want to show you Disaster impact. This is preparedness, mitigation, prevention, development, recovery, response. These 6 core areas, if we need to have some idea, if we need to have some document, then I think at least we will do something during disruption, during disaster, or we can minimize the disruption causing disaster, right? So pre-disaster risk and called reduction phase, post-disaster called recovery phase. So risk assessment of libraries, how to assess the risk of a library. There are external risk and internal risk. So both these risks, being a student, being a library colleague, we need to adopt some ideas. What are the external risk of a library under disaster and what are the internal risks under disaster that might cause the disaster, that might be risk for the library. Once you know about this external risk or internal risk, then only you will be able to address the minimization of risk of your library. And to minimize it, at the very outset, you need to assess the risk. And to assess the risk, you have to have some idea on what are the external risks, what are the internal risks, right? Now, let me jump over disaster planning in libraries and other information center. How to plan out? So, objective of disaster planning for libraries, first we need to know to protect library material to avoid a disaster by being proactive to reduce possibility of a disaster and to reduce effects if a disaster happens, and to expedite response and recovery efforts in an organized and systematic manner. Benefits of having a plan: first response, avoid escalation, prompt SOP for pressurized situation, resilience for absence of key personnel, sound basis for decision making, then avoid dithering and knee jerking, potential hurdles circumvented in advance to maintain the institution's ability to continue functions during and after major emergency, to reduce damage to collection, to decrease the amount of time it takes to implement disaster recovery procedure. So these are the several benefits if we have the disaster plan for a library. Then basic elements of preparing a plan. What are the basic elements? Conducting a risk analysis. First, we need to know what are the risks. Then identification of existing preventing and preparedness procedure, existing situation. Then making recommendation to implement additional preventive and preparedness procedure. Allocating responsibilities, devising procedures to respond to and recover from disaster. Now, guideline for the disaster planning process. What are the different guidelines on the basis of which for any institute, for any library and information center, for any kind of corporate bodies or NGO, they may plan out their disasters management. So first, assign responsibility. While one staff member may have the main responsibility for organizing and updating the plan, a disaster team must be formed. Do preliminary research. Set up liaison with local emergency agencies. The team should contact community personnel such as the local fire marshals. These people can then tour the library and see it layout and collection first-hand report. Then they are advising and guiding what is to be done to have the disaster plan. Establish goals and tasks for team members. The particular team member, this team cannot be for team in a paper and for website uploading. This team will be for quick response, responsible response at the time of occurrence of any disruption or disaster, right? Because most of the cases we found that there is a big committee of 20 people, 30 people, 40 people, but works can be carried out by, or works is to be done by some finger count people, right? So conduct a collection survey and determine salvage priorities. Locate and assess potential hazards. A vulnerability assessment survey is essential to identify the types of emergencies that may occur, determine the probability of their occurrence, and judge how much of a danger each would pose to the continued operation of the institution. Consider financial implication. Yes, to do something, to do anything, without money, we cannot run out. The relation in between the disaster management plan and the money is just like a flesh and blood, just like oxygen and human being. Without the money, this disaster management plan will not speak, will not sustain, will not survive. And the UN Sustainable Development Goal is also this part of that. That to sustain something, we need to have the disaster management plan. Then implement the plan. Yes, we have the plan, we have the policy document, we have the SOP. So, during the actual need, actual occurrence, that plan should be activated. That plan should be will be workable. Otherwise, that plan is for plan, that plan is for document, that plan is for website uploading, no more. And test, revise and maintain the plan. In most of the cases, what happened? It is like that we have a disaster management plan and we have uploaded it and we have documented it, we have considered a committee, responsible team, everything is fine. But due to the marshalling, due to the drilling at a regular interval, at a regular practice, when the occurrence will come after 5 years or 10 years, we don't know at what point of time this accident will come, because accident will not serve any notice. Therefore, test, revise, maintain the plan, I mean updating the plan in passage of time is also to be considered. Then disaster prevention, how we prevent the disaster, the survey preservation needs, then identify emergency funds and insurance coverage. In the case for a library, we can assess the pricing of our entire collection of books at least and find out the average price of the furniture and fixture, and then we can have an insurance plan like human insurance plan, life insurance plan, so that if any disaster is being occurred in near future, at least we can have some fund to rehabilitate, to restructure, to restart, to reconfigure, to reimage, to rebuild. Otherwise, whatever we have lost our resources, that is lost in one way, and we don't have any fund to grown up by a passage of time, and we will be failed to replace, will be failed to surmount, will be failed to sustain and survive. Then preparing a first response action list, compiling up-to-date telephone list of staff and volunteers, purchasing and distributing in-house suppliers, identifying source of supplies, service and experts, have comprehensive insurance for the library or archive, its content, the cost of salvage operation and potential replacement, rebinding and restoration of damaged materials, writing an adequately specific disaster plan. Then disaster preparedness. This is basically, as I said, how to prepare to combat with the disaster. So by this slide, I wanted to give you some literature, give you some points, how one can prepare or one institute can prepare to combat and to face the disasters, right? Now, we will know something about disaster response. Basically, this point is very important because this is the point when we have to act during the occurrence of disaster or disruption, right? I mean fight. So to do these things, some work we have to do before the occurrence, some work we have to do during the occurrence, and some work we have to do after the occurrence. Therefore, this can be compared with our any sorts of local festival where we are dealing with the paisa from other people, like any local Durga Puja, we have to collect subscription from locality. Then we have to ordering the necessary things related to puja. Then during the 3-4 days puja, we have to have some work. For that we have to have plan. Then After the puja, we have to compile the accounts, income and expenditure, receipts and payments, and call upon the locality and to place the accounts of puja, receipts and payments. Why this is? Simply because the moment one has to dealing with the rupees or amount or fund from locality, it's our compulsion to place the accounts before the community so that transparency can be figured out and honesty can be established. Likewise here, since we the librarian, we are always dealing with the public money and procuring resources and preserving it to disseminate for the next generation, right? And it is our duty to save that resources for decade after decade, century after century. And to do it, we have to have some conception, some knowledge on disasters, which is in planning stage, I mean before the occurrence of disasters or disruption, called pre-disaster work, that is risk analysis, plan out, then preparedness and marshalling, rehearsing, then drilling, revising our plan of action, organizing awareness program, all these things is called pre-disaster work. Then during disaster is this response, how to combat, fight with the disasters, called the disaster response during the disasters or occurrence of the event. And after the disasters, how quick we can restore, how quick we can recover the normalcy. So this is the things which one has to know, be it librarian, be it non-librarian, but for a common citizen, as I said repeatedly, nowadays we have to have some idea on disasters management, including e-disaster or d-disaster, I mean electronic or digital, because sometimes we are facing threats after going to the bank that D-link, bank is having no link and we will not give in money. In ATM, there is no money, so cash cannot be dispensed by the system. Likewise, and here as we are talking and capturing our classes in virtual mode, in video, using video platform, there we are dependent much of the thing which are not under our control, right from electricity to electronic gadgets, right? That is why I am saying it very simply, very clearly, emphatically, so that you are the future librarian maker. So that is why you need to know how to save up my resources and how to be acquainted with the disasters management or disruption management. And to sum up, disaster is an unwelcome guest. You see, disaster is an unwelcome guest. It disrupts normal life and puts the developmental targets out of gear. Disasters can result from natural or man-made causes or a combined effect of both. The impact of disasters are felt more strongly when the affected community is more vulnerable, either in terms of physical exposure or vulnerable socioeconomic conditions. Therefore, disaster management is a public administration issue, since disaster mitigation has to be achieved in time through public policy. Disaster management needs to be seen in a developmental context, and preemptive action needs to be taken to reduce the impact of the disaster's level. And in conclusion, we can say it is clear that no library can free itself from disaster of whatever form it is, whether natural or man-made. The saying that misfortune comes on wings and departs on foot. Again, you see, this is a common proverb, but equally applicable to the library, the saying that misfortune comes on wings and departs on foot is very valid here. Disaster management is becoming an instrumental component of the overall management plan for a library or archive, particularly in the current context. The importance of an effective disaster plan is regularly demonstrated in institutions which are strongly committed to their plans. And this is for your sample question, that what is disruption in libraries? what are the causes of disaster in libraries, how to prepare disaster plan, how to respond during disaster disruptions, how to minimize disruption in libraries. And this is again MCQ. I think you can guess Disaster Management Act passed during the year 2004, 2005, 6 and 7. Any one of the option is correct, and from the presentation, from the slides and from the text reference given at the end, book list given at the end, I think it is very easily to find out the right option to check. The nodal ministry for chemical disaster is Ministry of Health, Ministry of Railways, Ministry of Environment, none of the above. Then full form of UNDP is very easy. United Nations Digital Program, United Nations Development Planning, United Nations Digital Planning, United Nations Development Program. So, by your attention, by your searching efficiency, I think you will be efficient enough, right enough to find out the perfect answer and option. During risk assessment of libraries, we have to consider risk of 4 type, 3 type, 2 type, none of the above. In the presentation, it was clearly spelled out. Then global warming and extreme climate concerning to environmental hazards, human-made hazards, both A and B, none of the above. This is little confusing, but in a particular slide, you will get the right options to proceed. This is the reference and bibliography. You can go ahead on your need and interest. I think you will be able to know something at least, because it is not possible to let you know all the things by a class, by giving some documents to aware you, update you, skill you on disaster management thing. But at least by this class, by this video lecture, I want to make you aware how to be prepared, how to be responsive, how to be conscious about the public resources and to save it, to save from the disruption and disasters, how best we can do it. So, thank you.